I was a construction worker back then. We had to replace an old connector water pipe from a great church in our city with a new one. Around the church there was a lot of green lawn, which, as we were about to learn, was used as a graveyard for the richer citizens from 1100 up to 1800. The thing is that the ground there is very clayey, which brings the dissolving of a human skeleton to a halt. This, mixed with the old grave-digging habits from the people back then, led to our excavator digging out lots and lots of human bones as soon as it got deeper than 1 meter. It was pretty awkward as our construction team was just standing there staring while the excavator unearthed whole skeletons and then cut them in half because, in real life, the bones aren't still connected like they are in cartoons and such. I, as the trainee back then, got the job to pick the bones from the earth pile the excavator created, while my 3 coworkers just stood there refusing to just touch anything. I stood there, wearing gloves, taking up bones in a complete skull, brushing them more or less clean and collecting them on a piece of cardboard until the archaeologists showed up on the site. They took photos, told us some facts of when the place was a graveyard before taking off again. After the work was done, we threw everything back in before the holes got filled up. The paranormal part about this was that as soon as I started working at the bones, I felt like I was being watched, not only by my colleagues, but also by the dead. Not necessarily the ones I was holding my hands, though. At some point, I was even able to see them, but only from the corner of my eyes. I was around paranormal things since forever, and I saw 2 people standing right next to the hole watching as I did my thing, but they would disappear as soon as I turned my head towards them. At first, they seemed to be upset. Gestures that I couldn't quite hear, but as they noticed I was very careful and respectful with the remnants, that they just stood there and watched me. After that, they disappeared, but I saw them again. They reappeared in the same style on the always free back seats of our car as we headed back to the department. I was the only one seeing them, but my coworkers were a little bit creeped out by the fact that I touched human bones without hesitating. The phenomenon stopped after I prayed for their souls later on. It was a fun job, but not the only weird experience. In 2018, I went on a semester abroad in Korea, and on one of our weekend trips was to visit the Demilitarized Zone, or the DMZ, between North and South Korea. I wanted to go because I thought it was important for me to understand the place I was in better than just a short academic visitation. We drove up in a tour bus and spent almost the whole day going there, being there, and coming back. Visiting the actual border of the DMZ wasn't that unnerving. The folks stationed there were very nice, and even though they warned us to mind our P's and Q's, I was still at relative ease. I knew I had to be very respectful of this place and tried not to goof around or take pictures of too many things. It was really educational and enlightening. And here's where the weird stuff begins. We got back to the bus, drove up the road, and were invited to walk down the actual excavated 3rd tunnel under the DMZ. There were virtually no animals anywhere around. No birds, no bugs, no wildlife at all. The area is like a grassland with some trees, so I expected there to be some birds or squirrels or even mosquitoes since it was going into spring. But there was literally nothing except the people who worked there and our tour group. That started to make me uncomfortable because even at the actual border there were some pigeons and crows. It immediately had my hackles up. There was supposed to be a shuttle that goes all the way down to the armistice clock, but it was being repaired, so we had to walk. The further we walked down the tunnel, I felt like I was walking through rising water. It started at my ankles, then up to my knees, my waist, and by the time we got close to the armistice clock, I felt like it was all the way up to my neck. I started walking on the balls of my feet with my chin up on reflex because I had the physical sensation that I was trying to wade through neck-deep water. I didn't notice until my friend asked me why I was walking funny. When I walked normal, I felt like the water was over my head and I couldn't breathe. When I got to the armistice clock, I felt dizzy. My vision was getting spotty and I wanted to turn back. I couldn't move my feet from where I was standing. I felt like something was pushing my chest, and all of a sudden it felt like I wasn't myself. I felt like I was someone else. I looked down and I felt like I was wearing the wrong clothes. I remember thinking, I'm out of uniform. I kept trying to push the thoughts away and leave, but I couldn't move. I felt frozen. I was staring at the wall behind the clock, a wall that was supposed to be a barrier to keep people from using the tunnel to move between the north and south. Even though I couldn't actually see anything but the wall, my brain felt like I was looking at a woman and her son. I don't know how to describe it. I guess it's like you're not looking at something, but your brain is receiving some information telling you that you are. I felt like I knew them. The longer I stood there, the more people I thought were there. I remember thinking, there are 12 of them. I kept stepping closer and closer until one of my friends asked me what I was doing. I didn't even realize I was moving from where I was originally standing, which was about 3 or 4 feet away from the clock. I couldn't snap out of it until my other friend tapped my shoulder and said we had to go back up and get back to the bus. When I turned around and looked at my friend, I didn't recognize her. When I turned around to leave, I remember hearing the woman say, "Wait, where are you going?" When I kept walking, I heard her say, "Please, don't leave us down here." I wanted to cry. I didn't start feeling like myself until I got back on the bus to drop off my backpack and stop in the gift shop before we went back to campus. Apparently, I looked terrified. The cashier asked me if I was okay, and when I said I was, she kinda gave me a funny look. I eventually got over it until my friend went to Korea on a semester abroad last fall. They went to the DMZ again, and I asked him if anything weird happened. He told me that he felt the feeling of rising water too, and even the weird out-of-body feeling at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel doesn't end until you're past the border, but the end we stopped at was the clock on the wall. If you go further, like right to the wall, you get in huge trouble, and I wasn't going to risk that after already feeling so strange. He told me that there was this film they watched after the tunnel that documented its history, like when the tunnel was completely flooded to keep people from using it to move in between countries. I missed the film because it took me forever to get up the ramp for some reason. I mean, I knew I was out of shape, but I felt like I got hit by a freight train for some reason. So I walked around the museum looking at some photos of the Peace Talk complex's construction and the different complexes that are around the DMZ, like housing for the people stationed there and for workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex, which has been decommissioned for a long time. It really unsettles me when I think about it. If I think about it too long, I don't sleep right for a couple of days. I haven't found a good place to talk about it at length until I found the sub. Thanks for being here and for reading about my experience. When I was little, I would frequently wake up in the middle of the night, almost always under sleep paralysis. The times I wasn't paralyzed, I would try to go to my parents, but they often didn't like when I bothered them, so that eventually stopped. I would go pet our big, floofy German Shepherd instead. This worked wonders, and I'd always go back to bed, content again. The times I was paralyzed, though, I couldn't do much. It freaked me out, and I would be terrified for however long it took me to either break out of it or fall asleep again. It felt like something was sitting on my chest, which is a common feeling for sleep paralysis, I'm finding, but to a kid, me, I had no idea, and it scared me half to death. But one night there was a man in the room, a light blue, transparent, glowing figure with big wings, which sounds silly, I know, but the pressure on my chest would be gone. I was still paralyzed, but I wasn't afraid or even uncomfortable. He didn't have hair or a face, just featureless energy. He was just like a ghost, a soft outline of a person. The first time I saw him, he didn't have the wings. He stood in the back of the room and just watched me. That scared me too at first, a weird glowing figure that was just in the corner of my eye since I couldn't move my head while paralyzed. But the lack of pressure, the lack of any sudden movements from him, the calmness and quiet glow made me think otherwise. When I broke out of paralysis, I tried to look at him better, and he was gone. I started looking forward to being paralyzed just to see him again. I'd see him a few more times. At first, he was still just standing in the back of the room. Then he'd move around a little, then a decent amount. Like every time he visited, he got more curious about the room itself. He eventually even showed up sitting on the side of the bed next to me, just looking at me. This is when I could see his wings for the first time. Even though I couldn't move or talk, I felt safe with him around. He mellowed out my then overwhelming fear of the dark. He never touched me or moved my stuff, just walked around and looked at the things in my room or stared at me until I fell asleep. I'd try to stay up, to look at him better, to talk to him, but I'd always eventually feel so calm I'd just sleep again. I eventually stopped seeing him as I grew up and stopped having sleep paralysis. I've only seen him one other time, a few years ago. It was shortly after I'd survived a shooting, so many people died there. I felt like I should have died instead of any of them. I kinda still do, but fresh, it was awful, new, a terrifying feeling, and I felt so alone. I woke up with the first sleep paralysis in years, and he was there, standing in the back of the room, wings and all. He kinda shuffled there for a bit, then he walked up and sat down next to me on the bed, just watching me like he always does. I felt peace at the time where I thought I'd never feel it again. I fell asleep. I've yet to see him or have sleep paralysis since. Now, logical me thinks I just made an imaginary childhood friend for myself. He was the same color as the moonlight in my room, though he could walk in and out of the moonlight, and I have no physical or video evidence, just my memories of him. Maybe the new low I was in just brought a need for him one last time. Maybe I just felt like a kid again and imagined something to comfort me. But a part of me likes to believe he's still out there, helping people. Maybe it's his job or purpose. Maybe it's just a hobby of his. Does he only come to me or to whoever needs him? I remember calling him Angel once I saw his wings because he was pretty close to how people describe as such. I've never been religious, but it is a nice thought. To think he and maybe others like him show up just to be there for people who are scared and lonely. Part of me hopes he still watches over me. So I grew up in a house that had a few spirits in it. My family are all skeptics and would find some way to explain things away. A few experiences, and then I'll get into the main story. 1. Our house was 3 stories with technically 3 master bedrooms, 1 on each floor. The one on the main floor we used as an office. I would constantly hear someone walking around in the office at night, sinks turning on, toilets flushing, and occasionally talking. My parents would always say that someone was awake and make those noises, and the toilet and water running was just faulty pipes. 2. There would be a shadow figure that would pace on the top floor. There was like a balcony that overlooked the foyer, and I would usually see who I presumed was a lady in a dress pacing. My parents just said it was a shadow of someone outside. We were on a hill overlooking all of our neighbors, and I don't know how they thought this was possible. 3. I hated using the upstairs bathroom, which was my bathroom. I would hear talking and singing from the bathroom. When no one was home and I was there, someone would bang on the door. One time I was showering and listening to music. I heard the banging really loud, so it actually shook the room. Then the locked door swung open, and then I heard a scream. My parents said my brother was pranking me, which is something that he never did. But either way, on to the main event. My brother is about 10 years older than me. He was the only sibling living at home with me and my parents. He had the master bedroom in the basement. I was never really in the basement except for going to the garage because it was in the basement next to the bedroom. I always remember feeling uneasy down there, though, but I wanted a big room, so when my brother moved out, I begged my parents to let me have his room, and eventually they caved and let me have it. I moved all my stuff downstairs, painted, and everything, and I loved my new room. I was talking to my brother about it one day, and he told me, "Watch out for the little girl who lives down there. She likes to laugh." I was shocked, as obviously I thought he was kidding. My whole family besides me never talked about stuff like that. I just laughed and shrugged it off. He was probably just trying to scare me, I thought. About a week after I moved into my new room, I had a friend come over and we're just laying on the floor next to the bathroom laughing and stuff when she goes to the bathroom. She closed the door and I was just zoning out when all of a sudden she goes, "Hey, that's not funny." I asked her what she meant, as I didn't do anything. She said that she heard someone laughing right outside the door, but I didn't do anything or hear anything. She left freaked out and assumed my brother put her up to it since she liked my brother. A few days later, I hear someone in my bedroom while I'm in the shower. I call out thinking it's my mom, but I don't hear anything. I get out, and as I'm putting my robe on, I hear a little girl giggle, and then, "Are you looking for me?" I freak out. I throw open the door to my room, but no one is there. I checked the garage and ended up setting off the house alarm, so no one could have come or gone through the doors without everyone knowing. I run upstairs, and my mom is livid that I set off the alarm, and I tell her what just happened. She told me my brother had a similar story when we first moved in, but it was nothing. I called my brother and asked him why he told me to watch out for the little girl. He said that I was the little girl. He was kidding because you would always come downstairs and just giggle really creepily. I never did anything like that. I told him that, and he got a little creeped out. I still would occasionally hear this little girl. I never saw her, but she did like to laugh and open the bathroom door and closet doors. I named her Sarah. My brother called me up today and asked me about this. He asked me if I was sure I never tried to scare him by laughing, and I told him no. He became uncomfortable. I don't think he knows how to handle the fact that our old house was mildly haunted. I have always believed in the paranormal, alternate dimensions, and extraterrestrials. I just generally believe that the universe is extremely vast and humans can't possibly mentally grasp everything out there and anything is possible. However, I've never been very sensitive to anything like that. I've experienced spooky things, sure, but nothing too extreme for me to explain it away. Picture frames that have been hung for years dropping to the floor seemingly out of nowhere in my childhood home, hearing unexplained footsteps, etc. All things I could dismiss. I've also seen several UFOs on the same night, and let me know if you'd like to hear about that, but about a year ago, something happened that I've never been able to explain, and I can't get it out of my head. I'm a female living in central Arkansas and was staying in a rented house with my stepsister and her boyfriend. I was 21. It was 1 floor, 3 bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. The living room and dining room are at the front of the house, connecting to the kitchen, and then there is a short hallway going down to all 3 bedroom doors at the back of the house. It was about midnight, and my stepsister and her boyfriend both had to work early in the morning and were asleep. I was still awake, but was getting ready for bed. I also would like to note that I had not been drinking, smoking, or watching anything scary. I had been chilling in my room watching television and was definitely not in a paranoid state of mind. I remember thinking my room was too warm for me to go to sleep. It was May, and Arkansas was already hot for the summer. I decided to turn my TV off and go turn the thermostat down a little bit. The thermostat is located in a little hallway just a few feet from my bedroom door. When you step into the hallway from the bedrooms, you can clearly see into the living room. We had a sliding glass door where you can see into the backyard and a motion sensor light on the back porch. We would not only lock the sliding door, but also had a pole wedged into it from the inside, so it will not open unless you move the pole. When I stepped into the hallway and made just a couple of steps towards the thermostat, the motion light out back was on, and I could clearly see 2 people in the living room. They looked like they were facing each other on the couch or just crouching in front of the couch. They were backlit from the outside light, so I couldn't clearly see their faces, just their outline. At this point, my first thought was that my stepsister and her boyfriend were fooling around in the living room. It was completely dark apart from the outdoor light, No TV on or anything, and for some reason I just thought that they were in there to mess around or something. It doesn't make much sense in retrospect, but that was my original thought. I immediately felt embarrassed and loudly said, "Oh, sorry guys." Then the two figures who were originally facing each other darted their heads towards me. It was very quick, almost as if though I startled them. Thinking I had walked in on them and scared them, I quickly turned around and returned to my room, forgetting about the thermostat. I kind of was giggling to myself, still not feeling scared, just embarrassed, and thought it was funny. I turned my light off and went to lay down in bed. As I laid there, I was expecting to hear them going back into the room or laughing or something, some sort of reaction, but nothing came. The house was so silent now without my TV on, and I laid there for about 5 minutes, then started to get worried. I decided to call my stepsister to confirm what just happened. I assumed her phone was on silent because her room is right next to mine and I didn't hear her ring. When she didn't answer, I called her boyfriend. His phone rang and he finally answered. It was clear that I had just woken him up because of how sleepy his voice sounded. I asked him if they were in the living room and he said no, that they were both asleep, and he sounded annoyed that I was calling him at midnight, knowing he had to be up at around 4. Still not even thinking about ghosts, I told him that I just saw 2 people in the living room and I think that people must have broken in. He woke my sister up, told her what was going on, and they both grabbed something from the room to use as a weapon. All I had was a pocket knife, but I grabbed it and we all decided to leave our rooms at the same time and step into the hallway. He walked ahead of us, and the 3 of us made our way into the living room, turning on lights as we walked. There was nothing. The pole was still wedged into the sliding door from the inside. The deadbolt and lower lock on the front door were still locked, as well as all of the windows still being shut and locked. Nothing appeared out of place. They assumed that I was high or had been drinking or something, or maybe just saw jackets hanging on the coat hooks. This experience still shakes me up to think about. I stand by there being absolutely no way that I had mistaken a jacket or a shadow for people, because when I spoke, the 2 figures had both quickly turned and faced me. The upper deadbolt on the front door could only be locked from the inside. There was no keyhole for it on the outside and no way for someone to leave and lock it behind them. There's absolutely no way someone could leave through the sliding glass door and replace the pole on the inside that kept it closed. I have never experienced something like this before or since. I am certain now that what I saw was otherworldly and not intruders. Nobody believes me, though. When I was about 10-ish years old, I lived in a really small town. My friends and I would often play on the trails near the forest after school or on the weekends, building forts and fishing, etc. One day we were walking on a trail and a lady in her mid-50s or 60s came out of the woods. She had dirt all over her hands and pants. She said her car had broken down and she needed help. We said we would go tell our parents to come help, but she insisted that we come into the woods. We said no and kept walking, and she just stared at us. It was like she just shut off as a person when we told her. The smile went away. Everything. Even when we were a couple of kilometers down the road, we could see her staring at us. We get back to my friends and we're playing tag or something in his backyard. And one of us starts making fun of the lady that we saw earlier, and out of nowhere, he is launched into his parents' shed, breaks the window on him and his arm. We all stand in shock. His parents came out and started yelling at us, blaming us and saying that we threw him. All of us ended up being grounded. To this day, we all seem to have the same reoccurring dream or seeing the woman in the woods, except every time I dream it, she is closer and closer to us. Does anybody have some experiences that are similar or advice for the dreams? And just to clarify, it was a small walking trail. There was obviously no car off the road, and I grew up in a real small place in Canada. My friend didn't fly into the shed 20 feet. It was like 7 or so, and nobody was near him. There has been much talk of skinwalkers surrounding where I lived and where I was born, but in my mind, she will forever be known as the witch. in the woods. I work in a hospital as a nurse. I was on a row of nights, which I dread. I ended up having 5 patients, 2 of which were under care for cancer. There are 2 events in here for 2 separate nights. Number 1, the night started normally as I assessed and passed meds to the patients and did my charting and other night duties, stocking and other stuff. Just at around 11 p.m., one of my palliative patients started ringing, complaining that there was a kid running in the room laughing and playing when they should be in bed. I checked the room to make sure that there was no one in the room and reassured him that there were no children in the hospital area we were in. I made him comfortable and left the room. He rang again. I went back to the room to see what he rang for. Agitated, he said that he was just looking to rest comfortably and that people should keep their children under control and not let them jump on his bed playing and laughing. This time I got the chills, but again, I reassured him that there were no children since it wasn't the pediatric ward. I told him that I would bring him a sleeping pill to help him fall asleep, but that I would be in a few minutes. I started walking back towards the desk and medication room to grab the sleeping pill. A bell rang. I turned around and saw that the indicator above his door was flashing. Slightly annoyed, I walked back to his room. He was agitated in his bed, and I asked him what was wrong. He again complained about this kid. He said that he was just in here again. I leaned over the bed and calmly explained, "There are no children in this hospital. You need to get some rest." He replied loudly, "He's standing right behind you." I stood up instantly and slowly turned around. Creeped out, I turned to face the patient, and before I could speak, he says, "He ran into the closet," referring to the lockers where patients can store items. I slowly opened the locker and saw that his jacket was swinging, but no one was in there. I turned and said that there's no one in here, and I rushed into the med room to give him his sleeping pill. Now, number 2, and this is a short one, I came out of one of my patients' room and was sanitizing my hands but facing the wall. As I'm rubbing my hands together, I noticed a shadow of something walk out of the room next door, and it walked into the room across from it as I turned to see. I went into the room where it walked into. I asked the patient, which was not mine, if anyone came into the room. She replied no, but with a shaky voice. I checked the room to make sure that there was no one in there. I left that room and went into the room where it came from. I looked around, but no one was in there. I checked the patient, again not assigned to me, and found that he had died. He was a palliative care patient. I walked out of the room immediately to inform the nurse who had the patient that he had passed away. She asked me to come with her to check the patient because she had been having creepy vibes every time she went in there. I agreed and we went. She did the assessment where you listen for a full minute. When she was done, we heard knocking on the wall. She said, "See, it's creepy." I didn't think anything of it until she said, "We're on the 4th floor, and the other side of that wall is the outside of the building." We quickly left the room. 4 of us came in there to shroud the body. Me and some of my buddies used to go to this place called Profile Rock in Freetown, Massachusetts, late at night, sometimes between 2 to 3 in the morning. One night during the summer, I go to Profile Rock with 3 of my friends at 2:30 a.m. just to mess about and explore. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but Profile Rock in the area we were in is part of an area called the Bridgewater Triangle, which is a site of alleged paranormal activities and also one of the most haunted areas in the state I live in. Continuing on, we climbed Profile Rock itself, stayed up on top of it for maybe 3 to 4 hours, and we all decided to leave. Now, as you're leaving Profile Rock, you have to go down this long path that's about 2 miles long to get back to where we parked our car. 2 of my friends are walking about 30 to 20 feet in front of me, and my other friend, now, I'll never know why I turned around, I didn't have a feeling like someone was watching us. I just simply turned around because, besides the moonlight shining through the trees in certain areas, we only had cell phone flashlights to make our way around. I remember turning around and seeing someone running at us from about 150 feet away, full speed. What threw me off wasn't that they were running at us, it was how they were running. You know how a zombie walks in a horror movie, dragging one of its legs, almost limping? That's how this someone was running at us. At first I didn't say anything and possibly assumed it was one of my friends or someone that was already in there who got injured and needed assistance, until this someone made it to an area of the path where the moonlight reached through the trees and gave them some perspective. What I saw still chokes me up to this day. You ever see a child try to draw a person? How they make a stick figure most of the time? That's exactly how this someone looked. I caught maybe a 10-second glance as it was running under the moonlit trees, but I saw no distinguishable facial features, no eyes, no mouth, and no ears. Its arms and legs looked like that of an extremely malnourished person, only completely black, and it didn't look like skin or any type of clothing from what I could see. I almost can't even describe it, to be honest, and you could blatantly tell it wasn't a mask or one of those Halloween blacked-out suits. I recall calling out to my friend in a panicked voice, who was walking with me, who was now maybe 10 feet ahead of myself. I shined my cell phone light on him as he was looking where I was just looking, and I could tell right away from his facial expression that I wasn't seeing things. It was now maybe 40 feet away from us, if that, almost the same distance as our friends in front of us, and me and my friend just took flight and started running. My two other friends in front shot around and asked us what was wrong, and I just replied to just run, and all four of us jetted for our car. I remember taking a glance back as we were running, and there was nothing there, even though whatever was chasing us would certainly be on our tails by now. We all hopped in the car, and my friend, who was walking with me, yells, "Dude, tell me you've seen that. What was that?" I told him I had seen the same thing. I asked him to describe to all of us what he saw, and he described literally the exact same thing I witnessed. By now, my two other friends are thinking we're just messing around with them, until my friend who was walking with me swore on his father who had passed away not even a month ago that he's telling the truth. I was kind of frustrated, to be honest, because I couldn't believe my other two friends didn't see it as they turned around to question why we were running, but it didn't matter now. We actually went back there with a few more people the day after and witnessed nothing, of course. I'll never know what it was or who it was or what it wanted. But I know one thing. There's no way two people both imagined seeing some stick figure specter in the woods. This series of events happened to me from when I was 4 to 12 years old. When I was younger, we weren't able to afford our own apartment, so we had to rent a room. My stepdad had a friend that offered to help. It was me, my two siblings, and my mother and stepfather. The guy's name was Diego, and he lived with his family. At first, we lived in his garage before moving into a tiny room. I didn't know exactly why at the time, but Diego got a divorce from his wife and she kicked him out. This was around the time that I was 4, and my stepdad offered to rent out to Diego as we were in the process of finally moving into our own apartment. We moved in, and all was well. Diego brought a son whose name was Valentine, and they rarely let us in their room. From all we knew, they didn't exist. Then, out of the blue, they had a puppy dog. For whatever reason, they never let us play with it. We didn't mind, really, since we could care less, but then the dog went missing, or so we were told. D and V, Diego and Valentine, didn't seem to care, and again, they got another puppy. We didn't think too much of it at the time, so we still didn't pay attention. So one day, my mom goes in to speak to them about something mundane, and she was shocked to see an altar to Santa Muerte, which is the notorious saint of death that the Mexican cartels pray to. Turns out they were sacrificing their dog in her name. My mom was terrified and told my stepdad, who then kicked them out immediately. They moved out a few apartments down, and I remember V would always taunt me with knives whenever I saw him. I also have some other stories of Valentine, but I might save some of those for another time. But anyway, me and my sister moved into the room and never really cared because we didn't know what was going on at that time. One night, me and my sister were watching Family Guy when we heard scratching on the window. This was one of those slide windows that went to the backyard, in which there was a fence that overlooked the back of the apartments onto a sidewalk. We looked, and that's when we both saw what we thought was some sort of werewolf-looking creature with yellow eyes just staring at us. At first, I thought it wasn't real, but then it turned so fast and slammed the backyard door closed, causing the whole fence to shake. From that day to the day I moved out, the fence was always bent in a way that seemed like it was pulled outward like a ramp. My apartment building was just one block with 4 apartments that were all vacant, so we were all alone. I didn't believe what I saw, so I asked my sister, and she said that she saw the same thing. We told my mom, and we switched rooms. Now my stepdad slept in the room alone. Another night, me and my sister were getting ready to sleep when the window started banging like if multiple people were hitting it at once. Again, we told our mom, but there was nothing else she could do. There are other times that things have happened as well. We used to have a stuffed wire doll that would pray whenever and only when the hands were clamped together. So one night, my stepdad heard the noise and went to find the figure. He found it in the bathroom, with its head in the toilet like something invisible was drowning it. He grabbed it, since he wasn't scared easily, and found it with no batteries. Now, my last big story, even though there were far more than these things happening, was that one day we walked to the store as a full family. The walk was around 3 to 5 minutes as we went to and from a local 7-Eleven that was basically in our backyard. When we got back, I kid you not, everything in the house was thrown around. The TV stand, every frame picture, basically just everything was thrown all over the floor. Basically, it was as if though there was a small earthquake that only took place in our house. We still stayed because we couldn't afford a new place, so we did everything we could to stop this stuff from happening. Things did cool down, but not all the way. It wasn't until 8 full years later when we moved that we realized that it wasn't just the house that was haunted. Things followed us to our new home, but we rarely ever encountered anything. The only thing that's still attached are nightmares that we have once in a while. To this day, I'm 17 years old and still have nightmares and dreams about my old home. As crazy as it sounds, I actually miss the old home and plan to visit sometime, as that's where I was raised and had the best moments in my life. Every once in a while, I would dream of someone being in my room, in the dark, waiting for me to get up only to get stabbed in the same place in my stomach. And I always woke up with a pain as if though I sprinted a mile after drinking a gallon of water without stretching. I'm not sure if anyone understands what I mean, but needless to say, it was very, very painful. My cousin Lloyd passed away a couple of years ago. He had a bad relationship with his daughter due to choosing his new wife, her stepmother, over her. His daughter never forgave him, and poor Lloyd spent his last years desperately trying to apologize for his horrendous mistakes and make peace, and to try and meet his only granddaughter. Lloyd came to realize that family is everything. It's the only important thing in this life. Sadly, he never did see his daughter or granddaughter. Lloyd would spend his holidays with family instead. We loved him and tried to give him that family connection he was so desperate for. Last year, I had an enormous fight with my mom and blocked her. About 2 months after that, things started going missing. It was just little things at first, once every week or two, and one of my favorite makeup brushes, my good hand cream, my favorite lipstick, my hairbrush, perfume, and worst, my engagement ring, just small but very personal items and only my stuff. And they were all items that have a designated place that I don't put down anywhere else. Over time, it became more and more items and more frequently, until I'd put something down and as soon as I'd reach for it again, it'd be gone. That was happening daily, It was driving me crazy. My house had become super active, and the footsteps could be heard at all hours, day and night, doors opening and closing, TVs turning itself on in the middle of the night, the guitars strumming themselves, whispering, lights turning on and off, etc. I kept asking for my things back, but to no avail. Then 2 of my dog's paperwork folders went missing. These folders contain all of my dog's important paperwork: pedigree papers, vaccination certificates, champion titles, etc. I breed and show my dogs, and right now I need both of these particular dog folders, as one is about to be bred and the other needs her booster vaccination, and I need her vax cert to take to the vet with me. I have 10 dogs and keep these folders all together in my filing cabinet. Only these 2 were missing. And finally it clicked. Bloody Lloyd was behind this. I don't know why I made the connection. Perhaps I could feel it was him. I don't know. At this stage, I hadn't spoken to my mom in 11 months, and I knew that what Lloyd was upset about was that. So I unblocked her number in my phone and told Lloyd to stop already, I'm doing it. A few days later, I get a text from my mom and I answer it. We start talking again. The activity stops, not another thing goes missing. The house is back to its normal level of activity, not the freak show it had become. I start asking Lloyd for my stuff back, and nothing. A week goes by, and it's my mom's birthday. I buy her a gift and go around to her place and have a visit. When I get home, I walk through the door and step on my missing engagement ring. You little beauty. Thanks, Lloyd, I say. Later that night, I find my favorite makeup brush on the floor of my bedroom. I vacuumed this morning. It definitely wasn't there then. Again, thanks, Lloyd. Yesterday I went out of town to do some Christmas shopping, and as well as buying some presents for other people, I bought my mother a present. I came home and my 2 dogs' folders were on the dining room table, and there's nothing else on that table, ever. So my dead cousin Lloyd is using theft and bribery to make me have a relationship with my mom. If you knew Lloyd, you know it was absolutely his style. Family is the most important thing. I am right now sitting on my front porch smoking a cigarette. I can't bring myself to go back inside my house. There is someone in there. Just over 2 months ago, I moved into a new house after losing nearly everything related to the virus. I won't go into details or draw this out. Typing this out is making my eyes well and every hair on my body stand straight up. But God, I saw a human-shaped shadow in my walk-in closet. Am I going crazy? Maybe. But I know that I am not at the same time. So this is what happened. I'm laying in my bed browsing Reddit. From the corner of my eye, I catch movement coming from my closet. Within literal milliseconds, I turn and see someone standing inside of it, looking right at me. You guys, I flipped out, sprung up, and ran out of my room, slammed the door, and grabbed a kitchen knife. I yelled and screamed about calling police, that I had a knife, and basically acted like a scared monkey. No response. After about a minute of yelling and realizing I had left my phone in my bedroom to call 911, I slowly peeked in. There was simply nothing there, you guys. Nothing. No one could have gone anywhere. I was livid and terrified at the same time. I saw this person. I saw their shape, their movement, their arms. There was a humanoid figure in my closet, and that is all I know. My family and I have been dealing with what seems to be poltergeist activity in the home we're renting. Occasionally we'll see figures, hear voices. What intrigues me the most is sometimes strange things that occur, such as me walking into my kitchen to find every cabinet is wide open, as well as everything plugged into an outlet is unplugged. December 1st comes around and I pull the Christmas tree out of storage and begin assembling it, but I haven't added the ornaments yet. At that time, I was very tired due to lack of sleep, so I took a nap. After waking up, I walk out into the living room and I realize that there is one ornament hung in the center of my tree. I got chills because my parents are on a work trip and I'm home alone. Maybe they like the holidays. I think it's pretty wholesome, but creepy nonetheless. My mom's mom, passed away when I was 7. We were close to her and visited nearly every weekend, so we spent a lot of time there. Now, in general, through my life, I unconsciously associate smells with memories, places and people, so when I smell things again, it will trigger a memory or feeling, even memories I'd forgotten about. So fast forward 16 years and I'm 23, and pregnant too, so particularly sensitive to smells. My mom was diagnosed with cancer. It was caught late, so it had already spread, and we were told that she only had months to live. A couple of months passed, and she had been admitted for another hospital stay. Me and my dad had gone for the usual daily hospital visit. She had the room to herself as the other bed was empty, window and doors were all closed. Coming to the end of visiting time, I got this strong smell. I was immediately reminded of my grand's house. I can't specify what the smell was, but it was just the smell of her and her home. It was a really distinctive stench. Never smelled it after my grand passed, and hadn't since till the day in the hospital. The next time I saw my mom was when the hospital called the next day and told the family to get to the hospital urgently, that she wasn't going to last the night. Sure enough, we got there, and she passed away after a few hours. I knew my gran was letting me know she was there waiting for her, which did give me a bit of comfort. This incident happened to me and a friend a month ago. It was not my first paranormal experience, but definitely one that made me think a lot about it again. We were outside at around 6 p.m. having a walk in my hometown when it was already dark when I ran out of tobacco. We went to a nearby corner store. I got my stuff, and afterwards we were on our way to my home. On the way, there is, I believe, a former Jewish gravesite, now a park on the left side. I wanted to smoke one before we go, but since this park is often visited by strangers, we passed it and sat down nearby on a small wall, rolling up. When I wanted to start smoking, I noticed a light flickering inside one of the apartments on the right side of the street. Graveside was on the left. We were also on the left, but on the top of the site. You could see through the window into what looked like the dinner room with a light bulb, which seemed really weak, therefore causing the flickering light. When I kept watching, though, I noticed shadowy silhouettes moving in a fast and weird way, but there was nothing in front of the bulb to produce such shadows. When I wanted to tell my friend, he told me that he had just seen it and was curious about what it was too. The first thing I did was get my phone and try to film the incident. I had a good camera on my phone, so it should be easy, right? But whenever I moved the camera to the specific window with the creepy shadows, my phone screen just wouldn't go dark, like when you get called and put your face to the phone. When I moved the camera objective away from the window, the screen returned to normal. I tried this like 5 or 6 times, always failing to take a picture or video because the phone screen wouldn't let me. I could have filmed everything else fine, except for that window. When I put my phone away, the light bulb suddenly stops flickering and shines like it had been freshly exchanged. It didn't flicker a single time afterwards, and we sat there for like 20 minutes before it seemed nearly dead. We were kind of creeped out and continued our walk then, but it still gave me the chills when I think about it. I was 16 years old and already at boarding school for roughly 5 years. My boarding school was situated in buildings that were originally used as a convent for priests and was also used as a graveyard in the Middle Ages. It has now been around for over 170 years as a school, going through 2 world wars, during which it was also used as a field hospital by the German army. Now, the thing you should know about the boarding school is that it was located in two large buildings separated by a large playground. The boarding school itself was located on the top floors of each building, separated by 3 floors to reach the ground floor. I didn't have good grades that year and was moved over to the other building of the boarding school with the junior years to be under a stricter routine and longer study hours. We always had about 1 hour and 15 minutes every evening to relax and spend time with friends after studying. For that, there was a large basement with a small TV room with a bar and a gigantic room with pool tables and kicker tables. The thing about the gigantic room was that it only had a single light switch, and it was connected to the school's theater and dance room, of which the doors were always locked and its lights always closed. Besides that, there was also a door that was always locked and supposedly connected the 2 buildings on the school's premises with a tunnel. Now that evening, I went down to the basement directly after studying, taking along my phone charger. It was a pretty uneventful night, and at the end of it, I went up the stairs, going up 3 floors, finally reaching my room. All of a sudden, I realized that I forgot my charger in the basement and ran up to the supervisor, who gave me the keys so I could go down to the basement. Once I was descending the 3 floors to reach the basement, I started to get this eerie feeling of being watched. The feeling got even worse once I realized that if I would scream, nobody would hear me, as there were 3 empty floors between myself and the boarding school. Once I reached the basement, I was calm again, unlocking the first door and opening the second one. As I slowly opened the second door, it felt as if though the darkness in that gigantic room was extremely thick, as if though it would swallow me. I know it sounds weird, but that's how it felt. I switched on the lights and started making my way past the ping-pong tables towards the back of the gigantic room, roughly 30 meters away from the door and the only light switch. As I made my way to the back, I was suddenly taken over by a massive sense of danger and imminent doom. I felt as if though I was being ambushed or led into a trap, and my heart rate skyrocketed. I quickly turned around and sped walk back to the door when suddenly all the ping-pong tables were making extremely loud noises, as if though people were slamming on them with their fists to stir up a fight. I started sprinting to the door in fear that someone might switch off the lights or close the door on me, and while I was getting closer to the door, the noise got louder and louder. Once I finally reached it, I switched off the light and slammed the door shut, and as soon as the door closed, the noise stopped. I quickly locked the door and ran up as fast as I could, as if my life depended on it, no pun intended, crashing into one of the supervisors making his way home at the end of the night. He asked me what was going on, as I was pale, sweaty, and shaking, and I told him what I experienced. Instead of trying to rationalize what happened, the first thing he said is that he experienced some scary things as well when he had to lock up the basement alone. He also told me to check with another supervisor to make sure nobody was down there. The other supervisor and I went down to the basement again and stopped at the locked door, trying to hear if someone was down there or if any students were messing around. We listened quietly and heard someone walking around. As soon as we opened the door, the noise stopped and we opened the lights, but nobody was there. Nevertheless, the back doors of the dancing room and theater was wide open. To this day, I get chills thinking back on this experience. Nobody could have been down there with me, without me noticing it, nor can I explain away the slamming noise coming from the pool tables. It's an experience that has never left me, and although I try to rationalize it, it still haunts me. What could it have been, is what I am wondering now. This happened 2 years ago, but it is one of my most vivid paranormal memories. It takes place in my childhood home where my dad lives. Some backstory on the house. I have witnessed strange shadows that shouldn't be where they are, or shadow people moving past doorways and watching from another room. Cabinets have been found left open after shutting them prior. Whispering, footsteps, door slamming, and other unexplainable noises have been heard by multiple people in the house. My great-grandmother has passed away in the house long before I was ever born. My family like to say it's her ghost since some of the unexplained events seem to correlate to her past. Her bedroom was where my sister's room is now. The lights in that room, and only that room, frequently fluctuate, growing bright and dim in a short span of time. She was also known to have a passion for playing piano. We used to have a piano in the living room. I have heard keys of the piano clicking before while everyone was in bed and the piano lid would be down. It was never a full note, just light enough to hear the tap on the ivory. What really caught my attention with the piano, though, was the shadow figures I used to see around it all the time. The layout of our living room was like this. Imagine you're sitting on a couch. Television is on the opposite side of the room, straight across from you. The piano was to the right, against a wall and tucked below a shelf. On both sides of the piano were open doorways, one leading to the kitchen and the other leading to the hallway. I would always see a dark figure sweep past the piano going from the hallway door to the kitchen door. Two of my friends, on separate occasions, had come over and slept in the living room, reported the exact thing to me. I never told them about it. And now, on to the main story of this post. I was visiting with my dad and sister for the 4th of July. My dad was out of town for the night that this happened on and let me sleep in his room since I didn't have one anymore. My sister was at work, so I was home alone with the dog, Lily. I decided I would try to go to sleep a little early since no one would be home for a while, and I didn't really enjoy staying in that house alone at night. I let Lily jump up on the foot of the bed and lay with me until my sister got home. I had gotten comfortable under covers and Netflix on my phone. After about 20 minutes or so, I started to notice something that kept catching Lily's attention on the ceiling. She kept glancing up and tilting her head. I didn't think much of it at first until she kept going for about 5 more minutes. Then she began to whine at whatever she was looking at. I tried to get her attention to make her look away since she was starting to freak me out, but nothing would work. I grabbed my phone and began recording by this point, not sure what I was going to catch. I recorded on Snapchat, regrettably. The clip cut off after a minute and I was about to start recording again when Lily jumped back as if something jumped out at her. She then proceeded to sprint out of the room. I was nearly having a panic attack by this point and stopped everything I was doing. I couldn't take my eyes off the ceiling. Lily was running around the house whining. About a minute of me frozen in fear later, Lily slowly creeped back into the doorway of the bedroom with her head down low. The hair in her back was stood up tall and her tail was tucked between her legs. She kept her eyes locked on the same spot on the ceiling and began to grow. My heart was pounding, but I was still frozen in place, not sure what was happening. Next thing I know, Lily is barking aggressively at the ceiling, lowering her gaze to the wall behind the bed I'm on. I quickly grabbed my phone charger and darted out of the house with the dog. We sat on the front porch for a couple of hours until my sister arrived home. I still get chills going in to that room. I've been sitting on this for a bit for a few reasons. It's really long and I wanted to be able to gather facts to support my story, and quite frankly, I didn't want to type it up while I'm in my house. As you can tell with the stories on my page, I have been engulfed in the gray of this world since I was a child. Until recently, I had never met someone who was as sensitive as me. It was enlightening and equally terrifying. I've been renting my house from a family member for several years now. Since day one, I knew it was haunted. I could feel the energy change the moment I stepped inside, and I could also tell it wasn't necessarily negative. I'm not a stranger to the paranormal, so when little things would happen like items moving or going missing, inaudible conversations in other rooms, or even my dog looking at an empty corner or wall, I wouldn't usually react, and I even nicknamed the ghost Bernadette, and would jokingly ask her or it to stop. However, within the last 6 months, the activity has intensified. I have had individuals in my house who are complete skeptics, but they have witnessed glasses thrown across the room and shattered everywhere, pictures falling from the wall, something or someone walking down the empty hallway and hearing it, and hearing people talking that weren't there. I even had to have my brother check that my gas alarm was still active because of the random areas in the house that started to smell like rotten eggs. Halloween night, I had a very small get-together, 6 people. One of my guests brought her wife, who had only met one other time. While my friends were playing games and passing out candy, my friend's wife, we'll call her Emily, pulled me to the side, seemingly upset, and stated that she needed to discuss something with me. She first asked if I knew about Mary. I'm running names through my head that my coworker had mentioned, and I'd never heard of Mary. I obviously tell her no, and she proceeds to tell me a very detailed story about my house. She explained that I had 3 spirits in my house, a spirit named Mary, a spirit named Franklin, and that I had a spirit who was always with me named Gary. She stated that Mary had died in the house a long time ago. Franklin had died on the land before Mary from a plowing accident and was still in his death state. She also confirmed my suspicion of extra activity. A few nights prior, in the middle of the night, I was in bed and jumped up from my sleep from a huge bang against my bedroom wall and a picture falling onto the end of the bed. Obviously, I was startled and especially spooked when I could see the indentation in my wall from what appeared to be something that had hit it. I jokingly said, "Not cool, Bernadette," and went back to sleep. Emily knew about this. She knew he had hit my wall and said it was Franklin's way of trying to get my attention. That when things are thrown in the house or fall off the wall, that it's Franklin. Apparently he is angry because I don't react. In my mind at this moment, I'm thinking, who's this woman? I don't know her, and I haven't told anything to her wife about my creepy house. I'm open with my experiences on here, but I'm very hush in person because of others' reactions. So I ask, how do you know this stuff? And her response still, as I'm typing this, chills me to my bones. Because he's standing right behind you. My first reaction is to look behind me. Nothing. Second reaction is to ask why I can't see him. He doesn't want me to. Third reaction is, why does he want to scare me? He wants attention. Since that night, the activity in my previously mildly creepy house has been off the charts. I don't get spooked easily. I have seen things that you see in horror movies, but my house is scary. The energy has shifted. I feel like I am constantly on fight or flight mode. I am typing this at work because I feel like someone is constantly looking over my shoulder, and I don't want whatever or whoever is to read this. I know, it sounds crazy. It's just my dog and me in the house, and even he has been acting differently. I've caught him multiple times sitting in the hallway looking at nothing, whimpering, and then runs under the bed. I literally have to drag him out. When I'm changing clothes or taking a shower, I feel uncomfortable because I feel someone is watching me. The house is nearly unbearable to live in at the moment, and I've been at a loss on how to make it go back to my mildly spooky house. I have used my sage twice now, and I think it just makes him mad. Franklin, that is. With that being said, I have amazing friends and connections to the historical site of my town. With some research, I found Mary and some other interesting details. Mary Frank, 48, died suddenly in my house on August 26, 1919, from neuralgia. Her spouse, Charles Frank, held the funeral in my house. I haven't been able to find a Franklin yet. However, before the Franks occupied my house, it was a stable for horses. It could be a huge coincidence that Mary's last name is Frank, and maybe Emily didn't get a clear message. I'm honestly not sure. I have asked her since, and she still thinks his name is Franklin. She's even come back to my house and told him to stop. He won't listen. I do plan to keep researching the area for a man named Franklin, but I'm not sure that there will be any documentation. Another interesting thing is that I do and did know a Gary, and he has actually been brought up before. Gary was my mother's best friend's husband who passed away from a heart attack when I was young. At the time, we lived on 20-plus acres of land, and he loved to go hunting on our property. When he passed, it was his wishes to have his ashes spread on our land. I was told many years ago that Gary watched over me. I know the activity in my house is increasing. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe because I am more aware now, but I don't feel in danger. I never have because I know Gary is there. I used to live in Indonesia before migrating to the States, and I remember this one thing that really scared me back then. I was probably 7 or 8 years old about that time, so I guess I can't blame myself. It was just my overactive mind, and I was just scaring myself, but here's the story. We had a stay-at-home maid at the time, which I think is a pretty common thing there. My mom would hire random maids, and they live at our house and get paid until they leave for any particular reason. We had a couple of them over the span of me growing up, but this one maid is the reason why I'm writing this. My family loved her because she was just overall a good person and helped my mom with daily tasks a lot. One of those tasks being to wake me up for school on school days. Usually I'd wake up to her calling my name a couple of times and then I'd get ready. But this one day I woke up to her voice, like she was having a conversation with someone, but it was just her voice. I don't know what she was saying since I just woke up, but I know she wasn't calling my name, and the thing that scared me was when I opened my eyes, I saw that she had her back turned towards me facing the wall. She kept talking to the wall until I called her, and then she turned around and acted as if I didn't just see her talking to a wall. And then she proceeded to get me ready for school. When I asked her who she was talking to, she said it was nothing and that she was singing or something. I don't remember if I believed her at the time, but I do know that that same night I couldn't fall asleep because I was so scared, and it didn't help that my bed position makes me face that same wall. So I told my mom, but she was a Christian and just told me to pray and sleep. That instance only happened once, and I've never woken up to my maid talking to the wall again. Eventually that maid left because of family reasons not too long after, so my mom had to hire a new one. It wasn't even that long before that new maid left. I overheard her pleading with my mom to let her go because she was so scared of living in our house. She said when she tries to sleep she would hear whispers next to her. Her door would swing open by itself sometimes when she was in the room, and she would hear someone knock on her door at times where we'd all be fast asleep already. But the thing that scared me the most from her experience is when we left her to guard the house alone while my family went to the market to get groceries. She said she kept hearing a lady's voice or something that sounded like my mom coming from our room upstairs while she watches TV downstairs. This reminded me of the last maid when she was talking to the wall, and this got me shaking. I don't remember sleeping with the lights off ever again after that. Even until now, I still leave the lights on. I think my mom got concerned for that maid at the time because she was hysterically crying while telling her all of those stories, so she let her go back to her family. Nothing strange happened again with the maids after her, but I developed a thing where I prayed every night before I slept since I was scared. What a terrible time. I still get chills, even just thinking about it. This happened when I was around 11. At the time, I had neighbors that owned this beautiful brick house that was over 100 years old. It was 2 stories tall and used to be owned by the Amish. They had completely remodeled it. They installed a bathroom on both the first and second floors. There were 2 barns, a chicken coop, the whole package. The property definitely came chock full of history. My neighbors also had a daughter that was a couple of years older than me, and we became close friends. I would go over to their house nearly every day. I would go all through the old barns, play on both levels of the house, and have the most fun. Nothing about the property scared me. In fact, I thought it felt more like home than my own house. That is until one day during the summer. We, my neighbors and I, were all outside enjoying the weather. I really had to go to the bathroom, so I ran to the house due to being quite a distance away. I always preferred using the upstairs bathroom. The stairs were steep due to how old the house was, and it was always fun for me to run up them. I walked through the kitchen and got to the base of the steps. I looked to the top of the stairs, and there he was. The memory of him is so fresh in my mind. He was a solid figure at the top of the stairs. He was an older man, white hair on the sides of his head and no hair on top. A black suit with no wrinkles, no fuzz, perfectly in order. Shiny white dress shoes with black accents, not a single smudge. I looked up to his face. The feeling I got then when I saw his face is the same feeling I get now. Pure terror. His expression was angry. His eyes were black. Not any shade of black I had ever yet to see again. The depth of his eyes felt like an eternity, and I had never felt evil like that before. Seeing him, I knew that this was no random intruder. I could feel him. His presence was tangible, and I knew that he was not human. When I finally regained my senses, I ran out of the house screaming. I had never screamed like that before. I told my neighbors what had happened, and they immediately went into the house because they believed that there was an intruder. Of course, nobody was found. I refused to go to the second story of that house alone again. I'd never seen him since. I know he was not a ghost or some vengeful spirit. He was the embodiment of evil. I assume what I saw was demonic. Whatever he is, I hope I never see him again for the rest of my life. Hi friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data. Located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, I'm not a grave robber or a pervert.